Welcome to Failed Forward, a podcast for professionals who are wondering, how the hell did I get here?
Join your host, Rachel Durkan, and me, Donna Miller, as we discuss the messy, bumpy, and often unattractive journey to success.
After all, if it isn't hard to do, is it really worth doing? Hello, and welcome to Failed Forward, the podcast for those of us wondering, how the hell did I get here? My name is Rachel Durkan. I'm with Paradigm Marketing and Design. We are a web marketing, branding, and sales enablement agency that specializes in working with clients with a complex sale. So if you have a sales team whom you want to close more leads, have more qualified meetings, and close deals more quickly, we can help build a marketing to sales infrastructure to make that happen. And I am joined every week by Donna Miller, my co-host.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you, Rachel. I am Donna Miller. I am Chief Visionary Officer and founder at C3 Workplace and Donna Miller Business Growth Consulting, where for the last 30 years, we've been helping companies and business owners to accelerate their growth by providing support and advisory services around operations, finance, and biz dev. In essence, we allow growing teams and business owners to focus on that which truly drives the business forward. And our clients know that by bringing us in, we're going to build efficient, integrated, and connected systems that they can execute on, or we can help them execute on. And in essence, we're laying the foundation to help them build companies that will run and grow without them, something I'm kind of passionate about. And we are delighted this episode to be joined by the fabulous Lauren Kaplan, who has an amazing story to tell us. So Lauren, introduce yourself and tell us what you do now and tell us how it all started.
Sure. Hi. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Lauren Kaplan, and I actually own and operate two businesses. I've had a marketing consulting business for about 22 years called Thinking Cap LLC, and I'll share a little bit more about that because it's had many iterations through the years. It started as a promotions marketing agency. So we used to find promotional partners for movies, DVD releases, sponsorships. And that's part of how how I transitioned into my other career. So I also became a doctor of acupuncture. I started graduate school in my late 30s, finished in my mid 40s, and opened a practice in Randolph. So I am now the owner of Restoration Health, Acupuncture, and Nutrition. We've been in Randolph for 8 years. Our mission there is to exceed expectations of the healthcare experience. We do that through delivering personalized and compassionate care, and we improve health and restore hope, most importantly, for people who feel like they've kind of hit a wall in terms of their own health crisis. So the question is,
that's kind of where your story starts, right? I mean, you had a situation that seemed hopeless.
Exactly. So if you jump back to 2007, I gave birth to my now 17-and-a-half-year-old son. And I was 36, so I was kind of older-ish at the time, had a big fertility struggle that got me there, but was so grateful. Had this beautiful baby boy who came out in 2 pushes. He was also 9 pounds and 10 ounces. And unbeknownst to me, I love your face, unbeknownst to me, broke my tailbone during the birthing process. So
we don't do for our kids. No,
no kidding, right? So I, at the time, was a runner, and as I mentioned, I had this marketing business. And now I should also point out, this was the end of 2007, early 2008, when the economy fell apart. And the whole dynamic of my marketing business had changed, because at the time, brands, really TV was how you marketed. So even the internet was very burgeoning. This was banners and skyscraper ads, and it was at the very beginning. So movie studios wanted brands to still be spending $15-20 million above the line to support their movie launches. And consumer packaged goods companies were like, no, we're not doing that. We can spend $500,000 in digital and actually measure it, right? So there was this big disconnect between what Hollywood wanted and what consumer packaged goods and services were willing to offer, but also the economy fell apart. So they weren't really looking to spend this money externally in promotions with marketing agencies being the first budgets to be cut. And, you know, I panicked, right? I'm self-employed. I've saved all this money. I'm watching my life savings drain. And I'm like,
oh, and you have a new baby. Oh, and your pelvis is broken.
right,
Yeah.
right. So I spent 18 months in and out of doctor's offices. The very first doctor I went to, well, so let me go back for a minute. So we were at my son's 8-week visit, and, you know, his pediatrician's like, how are you? And I'm like, I'm miserable. I went from being a runner. I used to do the Avon breast cancer walk. So I trained like 40 to 60 miles a week was nothing for me, because I did the 60-mile 3-day walks. I couldn't do anything. I was completely debilitated. I was in pain all the time, except when I was sleeping. And so the doctor was like, how are you? And I was like, I'm miserable. And he said, you know, how big was your son? And I told him, and he said, you probably broke your tailbone. You should go to an orthopedist. So I went to an orthopedist, and it was funny. I also want a sidebar. I don't know how funny I
Go
can
ahead.
this podcast, but you know, it was my first kid. So like, I didn't know from childbirth. I just figured it hurts. And everybody's like, well, you know, did you have an epidural? And I'm like, yeah, but you know, this is 8 weeks later. And they're like, well, did you have an episiotomy? And I'm like, I'm no doctor, but I know my vagina from my low back, right? Like, you know, so
I've got
again,
standard anatomy down. Okay.
well, you know, it speaks to, though, people denying you your personal truth
Yeah.
and what your experience. And I see this a lot in healthcare, which is part of what I think leads me to be a successful healthcare practitioner, because people are not heard in healthcare. So anyway, I go to the orthopedist, and he's like, yeah, you broke your coccyx. That's your tailbone. And he's like, we'll do a coccydectomy. And I was like, again, no scientist at the time, but I know that all our nerve endings are attached to our spine. And I'm like, I'm not risking, God forbid, becoming paralyzed, because like, no, there has to be another way. Well, I spent 18 months in and out of doctor's offices. I did physical therapy, physiatry, chiropractic, massage, you name it. And nothing made me feel better. And so I was like, I guess I need to have surgery. I mean, I was desperate. And a woman in my golf league was like, why don't you try acupuncture? And I said, you know, the only thing that scares me more than needles are knives. So I'm going to do it just to say I tried everything, right? Because I was so afraid of the surgery. And I ended up going for acupuncture. And in my first visit, I only got an hour's worth of relief. But if you've ever experienced chronic pain, an hour after 18 months was a reminder of like what my life used to be like. And then it was 3 hours, and then it was 3 hours. And then I think I had a full day. And by like my 8th visit, I was kind of back to living my life. Now, it did still take probably a good year. I mean, I had a butt barometer, like I knew when it was going to rain. I knew.
Blood barometer.
Like, what's a butt barometer? Okay, I get it.
Yeah, but it really changed my life. And so I then reached out to my childhood besties, and I was like, you know, I know this is crazy, but I'm thinking about going back to school for this. And, you know, I had done the research-ish. I don't think I really had any idea how hard graduate school was going to be. I was always a really strong student, graduated from Rutgers with high honors, no idea what I was getting myself into. But then after my first semester, I was like, well, I spent $3,500, so I might as well spend the other 85,000 and finish.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I fell into acupuncture.
Wow. So, one of the things I heard you say, and I think this is a common theme when we talk to people, earlier you said you were grateful for the struggle. So talk about the lessons in the struggle. What is that? What are the lessons?
Gosh.
How do you become grateful for the struggle?
Well, I should start with I live in gratitude every day. It is, I think, the most important practice a person can have, excuse me, for their mental health, for their physical health. I mean, so for me, this goes back to I've had a lot of other obstacles in my life, right? So this was taking a really big chance. I've always had fears related to finances because I've had many situations where the bottom has fallen out in my life. So I think, for me, the fact that I've managed to bounce back each time is why I live in gratitude. And this was one of those, well, at the time I was still fairly young, and I guess I can make it back. My gratitude was, I happened to, so when I got out of college, it was still the time when people thought they were going to have one or two careers. And I remembered, I had several jobs in my early 30s, and my best friend said to me, like, Lauren, you've had so many jobs, like, who's going to hire you? And I said, well, haven't found it yet. And I'd rather like be judged for that than live my life doing something I don't love. And I look at it now and I feel like, how lucky am I that I found two careers that I love, right? I still love marketing. I'm a marketing strategist. I do a very niche thing in marketing, but from a healthcare perspective, I mean, I'm helping people walk again. I'm helping people feel their hands and feet who lost feeling in their hands and feet. I'm helping people recover from anxiety, crippling anxiety. When you can impact somebody's life in that capacity, when you can have somebody on your table crying, saying you saved their life, and having experienced it myself, and I feel like I did not see this coming. And I'm not a particularly religious person at all, but I feel like this happened upon me.
So here you are, think about it in the low for a minute, like 2008, new baby, pain, career. At the time, I'm sure you were like, my business is, gonna be
Dying.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure. That was a tough
oh
time.
my gosh.
My income was dying. I mean, let me be clear. My income
That was the time I wasn't sure I would make it.
And you're like, I'm gonna spend $85,000 and spend years in so like now you have short-term crisis and you're investing in a long-term solution. How did you balance that? That's courageous and scary.
Oh, I'm not even sure I have a good answer for that. I mean, there were many, many times I leaned in on people I trusted. And I had a cousin, it's my father's first cousin, so she's an older woman. She was in her 70s, meaning like not a contemporary of mine. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, I'm going to be starting over in my mid 40s. Like, what am I doing? And she said, well, you're going to turn 45 anyway. You might as well turn 45 with a master's degree. And I was like, okay. And also I should add to that, in the meantime, I was commuting to New York City. I had my son. We had a lot of fertility challenges. So I also went through another 5 rounds. I went through 6 rounds of IUI and another 5 rounds of IVF in
Wow.
the midst of all this, trying to build my family. Like, oh, and this wasn't even the worst it got. I mean,
And
then there was
do you feel it
COVID.
in the moment? Like, do you feel in the moment like this is so heavy, or do you just keep going?
Yes, both. I mean,
Mhm.
both. And, that wasn't even the hardest time I lived through. I mean, the hardest time I lived through was COVID, because again, like here I opened my practice.
You're really
I,
getting bad luck with the economy every time you open
oh my
it.
God, I
Yeah.
became cash flow positive in February and we shut down in March. And
Yeah.
here I'm thinking I hedged my bets in healthcare, right? And
Mhm.
now boom. And my mother was diagnosed with 2 rare forms of leukemia, given 18 months to live, or she could have a bone marrow transplant. And my now ex-husband got diagnosed with cancer.
Oh God.
And I'm homeschooling my daughter who's in first grade with ADD. And I'm like
Yeah.
life literally went me to
Wow.
my knees.
So how do you get back up? Like for all of those
Um,
out there, there's people out there that are experiencing something similar, or maybe not exactly the same thing, but they're struggling. Like what you've lived through it, what's your advice to get back up? What's your
Well,
advice?
I think gratitude, right? Like you really have to take stock every
Yeah.
day in what you do
Mhm.
have and
Yeah.
not in what you don't
Yeah.
have. And I felt like, you know what? I got a roof over my head. I have food on my plate. I have my health. I mean, there was nothing like COVID to realize people my age were dying,
Yeah.
right? Um, and I survived a lot
Hmm.
of those things, right? So,
And now you know you can. Every time something real bad happens,
yeah.
you can.
And I'm not going to pretend I still don't have these existential crises, right?
Mhm.
Like I do a lot of mind work, a lot of it. I meditate, I do affirmations, I do
Mhm.
breathing. I, I think one big lesson I learned was
Good.
I was always afraid to make investments in myself and in my business.
Mhm.
It's one of the things I promised myself when I opened my acupuncture practice, because it wasn't something I did in my marketing business. Um, and I made a lot of mistakes, but I bounced back from them. And the one thing I will say is the single best investment you can make is the one in yourself,
Mhm.
because at least you will deliver dividends on yourself.
It,
Love that.
but I'm gonna say, and you're gonna be accountable to yourself when you make that type
Yeah.
of investment. Like, because you're not gonna bullshit your way out of it.
Yeah.
You can't fight yourself.
When I opened my acupuncture practice, then went to this conference and I put my credit card down on this coaching practice that was absurdly expensive,
Mhm.
like absurdly expensive. And I was like, I was sick to my stomach. But I did do the research. I spoke to other clients that they coached, and everybody was like, I made the money back in 4 months. And I will tell you, it absolutely transformed the way that I did my business.
Fantastic.
Great.
So,
Need the
Donna,
guidance.
as a plug for you, like coaching matters, right?
I
And
agree.
so,
And I love that I do it now, but the truth is my story is the same thing. I would not be who I am without, I've had probably a dozen different coaches, groups, masterminds.
yes.
I say that all the time. You cannot do it on your own. You don't have the perspective.
And you outgrow certain groups,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Always.
Like
Mm-hmm.
everything for a different time. To
Mm-hmm.
your point, like I'm in like two different groups, and then I have like a business entrepreneur group. Like they're all different, right? I've got acupuncture groups, and then I've got general business groups, and then I've got money mindset groups, and I'm doing lots of different things, right? And they all give me different perspectives. I do think for people out there who are business owners, you need to be around other business owners.
Yeah.
Nobody understands
And
challenges.
be vulnerable around, like,
and I think the other thing is to give yourself, this is specifically for the women entrepreneurs out there, not that men don't face this, but they don't mostly face this the way women do, is give yourself grace for the time in your life that you're at.
mhm.
You know, I absolutely believe I should be further along than I am, but I'm 52 years old with an 11-year-old, and I don't want to miss it. I got a kid going to college in a year and a half. It's going to break my heart. I don't want to miss it. So I have to balance.
But you shouldn't be further than you are. You should be glad
You're
that
exactly
you
where
had
you're
that
supposed to be.
time, exactly where you're supposed
Yeah.
to be.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're never satisfied, right?
No.
You know, yeah, it's funny. Lauren, your story is amazing. And I learned even more today than I knew. And so you've given us so many great little tidbits to think on. So as we wrap up, if you could go back and do one thing differently, what would it be?
Well, we didn't touch on this, but I had formed a partnership in my marketing business at the end of graduate school. And I did it out of fear. And it was a big mistake. Fortunately, I got out before we ever signed our operating agreement. It was with two other people. I should have, one of which was a woman who had worked with me for many years. And I was afraid to foot her salary. And the other was a client who turned out to be crazy. And so I wish I never did that, because that was a time and energy suck and a money suck. And I lost a good friend in that. However, I learned a lot about myself in the process. And I think the biggest lesson, and one I'm still struggling with, is you cannot operate from a place of fear. Fear can be a motivator, but you know,
not an ideal motivator.
No, it's not. You don't make always the best decisions.
I feel like if you put it in the right mindset, I remember being terrified during COVID, and I had a pity party for like a week. And then I remember, like, I don't know if it was brushing my teeth, but I was looking in the mirror and I was like, get up, like, stop. You can do this, get up. And I was terrified, but like, it drove me to be like, you're not going to die here. Like, get up, like, your company's not going to die here. And so I think it's how you channel it. Do you let it debilitate you and hedge, or do you use it and say, you know, suck it, fear, get up?
Yeah.
And I think it's how we can channel. And listen, I did that once. I've also been in times where I let fear control me. So it's your mind, how you can get your mind right around it.
Yeah. Well, and the other lesson that I learned is I don't want to be in a partnership, right? Like I would like to have great people around me, but I got to steer the ship, right? Personality flaw or leadership flaw, right? But either way,
but it is what it
reality.
is, and that's great. And you know, the one thing I think is, and you know, none of us are in our 20s anymore, but I think the great thing about being a little bit older is when you find yourself in that position of fear, you can remind yourself of all the times you walked through fear and you got to the other side of it. And so I love that you continue to work on mindset. And I think we all have to do that, whether it's meditation, whether it's affirmations, whether it's listening to podcasts. I do think a lot of it comes down to mindset, especially when it comes to fear. And I think fear is often based in the unknown.
Yeah.
You know, right? So we just have to kind of step into it. And as we step into it, it becomes known and the fear dissipates. So, well,
and it's
I
funny.
love your story. So
yeah,
if our audience wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Feelgreathere.com.
Feelgreathere.com. I love it.
Yes. So we are Restoration Health, And that is the best way to reach out. My email is lauren@feelgreathere.com. It's LAUREN is how I spell it. Happy to answer, questions relating to acupuncture, health, or business. You know, there's a lot of parallels in how I work with patients too. And I think it's funny because I'm not a woo-woo practitioner, except I'm a completely woo-woo practitioner. And that is because, I've learned that the same mindset can help people in their healthcare, right? Like it just matters. You just need that little bit of hope to let you know you can turn a corner. And if I can give somebody that, whether it's just through listening or that one treatment that makes them feel a little better and lets them know the next one might make me feel even better, and people are often surprised at the kinds of conditions. Like nobody thinks about anxiety and acupuncture. And during COVID, that was 40% of my business. And it's not for life. Like you actually can make huge improvements and end up in a come when you need me kind of scenario and go on and live a beautiful life.
Awesome. Well, Lauren, you certainly have a great story, and I'm so glad that you were able to join us for this episode. So thank you all, audience, for joining us. And until our next episode, I want to encourage all of you to embrace the lessons that we find in failure. Thanks so much, everyone.